So for our next object, let's go ahead and create a coffee table. I mean, we've got the sofa. Let's create a coffee table here. Now in Blender, we were able to run the game and then walk around the room. We can do that here in Blender as well. If you press Shift F and then hit the Tab key, you can drop down to the ground now. And I can move around with the mouse here and then press WASD and move around. So I'll try and just go in here and see how things look. It doesn't look too bad. I can move around here, kind of get a sense of what the room's going to feel like. So it's kind of a nice thing to be able to do here in Blender as well. Yeah, so why don't we put a coffee table right in here? I'm going to hit the Escape key now, and now we're back to our original view. So I'm going to create this very simple kind of coffee table here. It's got wood grain for the legs and frame, and then it's got this Formica finish. And I think what I want to do is use two different materials and two different UV maps, and yet keep it all one object. So let's give that a try. I'm going to go over to a brand new layer here, and let's just begin creating this coffee table. It looks like it's pretty straightforward. It's just some cubes, so let's go ahead and create a cube here. I'm going to first off go to face mode and select the top face and the bottom face and go ahead and delete these with X and delete faces. And now I can begin working on the legs here. I'm going to scale that down a bit and maybe make it a little bit taller with S and Z, and this can be one of our legs. I'll bring it up just above the grid here because it looks like it's got little feet underneath there that's holding it up off the ground. So that can be one of our legs. Maybe I'll move this over just to get a sense of the size of it, let's say, something like that. And let's work on this piece right up here on top. I'll create another cube. You can do that with Shift A and then select cube from the menu here. And I'll press SZ to scale it down. And let's scale it out in the Y, SY. Maybe something like this. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, maybe a little bit longer, SY. Something like that, maybe. And I'll bring this up to about where we want it, something like that. And I'll go ahead and shrink this leg down a bit. I just like to try and get a sense of the scale and proportion of the objects as I'm going here. So I'm just going to select these edges here and bring them down a bit, like that. And let's see how this looks if I slide that in here. All right, I think that's beginning to look okay. I think I want to bring the scale or the diameter of the leg down a bit. So to do that, I'm going to hit the S key, and then I do not want to scale it in the Z axis, so I'll press Shift Z, and now I'm only scaling in the X and Y. So let's bring it down about like that. Now for this top piece, it looks as if we've got an angled bit right here. Now I could insert an edge loop and scale the face down on the top. Of course, there's always multiple ways to do things, but let's work with a new tool here for this course. Let's go ahead and press Alt and click and Shift and click these edges around here. And now we can bevel this. So if I press Control B and drag with the mouse, you can see I can bevel this. But that bevel's looking awfully flat. I'm not getting it so it's angled in like this. See how it's just staying on top? So what the problem is, once again, is that we don't have uniform scale for our object. If we come over here to the Properties panel by pressing the N key and bring up here, we can see that we do not have uniform scale. So let's just come over here and press Control A when we're in object mode and go ahead and apply the scale. Now if we tab back into edit mode with these edges still selected, I'll press Control B and pull out with the mouse, and you can see now we're getting more of the effect that we want. And I'm going to press the Shift key as I drag just to make the movement a little bit slower. Yeah, so something like that. So once again, having uniform scale is an important thing for many of the tools that you're going to be using in Blender. So we've got that. Now we need a little piece on the top. There's just this little extra piece right up here. That's that Formica bit that we're going to have a new material for. So I'll just select this one face. I'll duplicate it with Shift D, hit enter, and now I'm going to drag up just a little bit. There it is. I'm going to scale it in just a hair. There we go. And then I can press E to extrude and extrude on down. Now look at what happened again here. Remember with the arm of the couch we had the problem with our normals. They were flipped. Well, we're having the same issue here as well. Let me just scale this in a bit in the X. It looks like I could scale it in just a bit here. Yeah, like that. So we've got this problem with this part of the table. I'm going to hover over a face and press the L key to select the whole thing, the whole piece. Even though that's part of the rest of the object of the top of the table here, pressing the L key only selects the linked components. So I can then press Control N, and now all of the normals are facing the proper direction. They're facing out. Now I don't need that face underneath here, so I could probably press Shift H to isolate it, select that one face, X, and delete faces, and now I'll press Alt H to bring everything else back. Alright, so now we've got the tabletop with that little Formica top thing there. We also need this piece right here. Let's take a look at creating that. Once again, I'll just come over to the Create tab and press Cube. And let's scale it down with the S key. Scale it in the X with S and X. And let's move it up into place. I think I'll hit the 1 key. No, let's go with the 3 key here and the 5 key just so I can come into orthographic view and take a look at this. I'll kind of arrange these properly. Something like that. This piece, it looks like maybe it could be a little bit smaller. And then I'll scale in the Y, SY. Scale that out. There we go. I can take this piece now and duplicate it. Shift D, hit the Y key and drag it over here. There we go. Now I'll select this piece here and move it forward in line with the legs of the table. I'll hit the 3 key, nope, the 1 key, and move this over. Hit the Z key to go to wireframe, and let's just put it right about there. All right. So now we can select these 3 pieces, go to our top view with the 7 key, and Shift D and hit the X key and move these over. Something like that. Now I'll just take this one and move it over just a little bit like that. There we go. Now we should create the pieces on the ends, so I'll duplicate this and hit Enter. Drag it into the center a bit, and then I'll rotate it with RZ90 and move this up and scale it in the X, SX. And then we just need to put it down here, Shift D and the Y key, and move it down here. I think I'd like little feet on the bottom here, so maybe I'll create a cylinder. We don't need 32 sides to it. Maybe I'll just take it down to, oh, I don't know, 8. And we don't need the caps filled, so I'll change that to nothing. And now I'll scale this down pretty small here. And let's take a look. Here we go. Hit the 1 key on the numpad to go to the front view. And I'll bring this up just a smidge to there. And I just want this underneath here just in case it's ever seen. It's probably not going to be ever seen really. I'll press Shift D and X and drag it over to the other side. Go to the top view with the 7 key and let's put these in place right down here. Shift D, Y, and put these in place right over here. Okay. All right, so now that we have our coffee table, let's go ahead and quickly UV map it. So I'll come back over here to the UV editing screen layout. I'll select everything and frame it up with the period key. So let's begin, now that everything's selected, let's begin by just joining everything into one object because we want this piece to be all one object. I'm going to press Control J, and now everything is all one object. I want the pivot point of this object to be in the center here, right on the floor of the grid. And this is one of the reasons why I tend to model things right in the center of the grid. It's really easy to do things like mirroring, to snap the pivot point to the 3D cursor in the center of the grid so everything is centered and the pivot point is where it needs to be. I'm going to hit the T key and open up the Tools panel here, and I just want to go up to the Tools tab and choose Set Origin to 3D Cursor. So that makes sure that the pivot point of this object is on the floor in the center so it's easy to move around. I'll tab into Edit mode and let's begin UV mapping this object. We could probably just select the inside edges of these legs here and add seams to these here. Control E, mark seam. We could probably do the same for our little tiny feet down here. Just select an interior edge of each of these and mark a seam like that. And these pieces here, these crossbars, we don't really need the end pieces for these parts, now do we? So if I hit the Z key to go to wireframe, and then I'm going to Control Tab and hit the 3 key to go to face mode, these faces right in here, they're not going to be seen. So I'm just going to select those and hit X and delete faces, because frankly, I don't want to UV map them if they're not going to be seen. Get rid of those. That makes my life a lot easier because now I can just come in here and select these edges on the inside bottom and just mark a seam, and there we go. And we're done with those. Now for this top piece, we could probably try Alt clicking this edge, say, and each one of these, Alt Shift click these, and probably mark seams right along here. Let's try that. And I think maybe I'll mark a seam all the way around here as well, just to split out that bottom piece. And I think I'll split out that top piece too. Why not? I'm going to go ahead and mark a seam here and then split these out as well. There we go. That makes my life a little easier. And that top piece, let me just see how that works. Since we don't have a bottom to it, it may just open up just fine in the UV mapping. We'll see. So I'll hit the A key to select everything. I'll press U. Now wait a minute. I didn't check the scale. So let's do that. I'll hit Escape, hit the N key, and tab back into object mode. And sure enough, let me apply the transforms for the scale here. Control A, scale. All right. Now let's go back into edit mode, select everything, hit the U key, and unwrap. All right, that's not looking too bad. I'll switch from conformal to angle based and see what I get. Yeah, I kind of like conformal a little better. Well, that's not too bad, but I'd kind of like all of these pieces going in the same direction, because it's going to be easier for me to lay down wood grain and have it all go in a certain direction if all of these are aligned the same. So to maximize this screen here, I'll hover over it and press Control up arrow, and then now I can work with just the UV map here. So I think what I want to do is take everything and make it go in the same direction. So maybe I want it all to be up and down. So I'll take something like this and press R90, and now we can begin arranging these. So something like this, R90, and that's kind of why I broke the top of the coffee table apart from the beveled sides, is so I could turn these in the same direction as everything else. And for this, it looks like here is that top part. This, I think, is going to be its own UV map, so I'm going to move this aside. And these pieces here are the underside and the top of the coffee table, but they're really not going to be seen very much at all. So I'm going to shrink these down quite a bit and rotate them 90 degrees, and I'll put them with all of these. I'll select the B key and click and drag to select all of these. And let's see how this works. I'm going to scale these up some and try and maximize the resolution within this 0 to 1 space. Let me try and put these in place in here. There we go. All right. Oh, and I want to put these guys right in here on this map as well. I'll put them over here. Why not? There we go. I'll press Control up arrow to go back to my normal view. So there is the UV map of the wood grain part. So I will go ahead and create the material for the wood grain. I'll go to Object Mode, New Material, call this Coffee Table Wood. And now I'll tab into Edit Mode and just select this top piece, this Formica piece. I'll hit the L key on one of the edges right there. And I will create a new material slot, a new material, and I'll call this Coffee Table Top. Mainly because I don't know how to spell Formica. So now I want to assign these faces to that coffee table top material. So with that selected, I'll just click Assign. And now if I click Deselect, it will deselect that, and I click Select, it will select that. And then if I select the wood and hit Select, it will select that. So notice when I select everything in the table wood material, we see only the UV map for that part. And if I deselect that and select the coffee table and hit Select, we only see the UV map of this. Now I can take this and move it over and scale it up so it fits in the whole UV map there. Now when we take these into Unity, it will see these as two separate materials with two separate UV maps. So in the next video, what let's do is go ahead and export the UV map out to Photoshop, texture it, and then take it into Unity and test this.